Hello all, this is Dave Putz from JKP Holdings. I want to share this with you guys, kind of a overview of what to put in a calculator when you're trying to make a bid. Uh, I'm broken into different parts, and I could definitely share this whole spreadsheet for those who are interested. But I want to kind of quickly go over some things to clear up some questions I've been asked over the many years. First off, evaluating a property. You want to compare like properties, which means bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, year built, type of home, location home, which means what type of neighborhood it's in, um, and where it is in accordance to railroads, churches, schools, and whatnot. Nearby environment, same kind of idea of what type of neighborhood it's in. Like properties, meaning a bi-level and a ranch are different types of properties. And of course, condition of property. Next, what you should pull from your tape. I'm going to expand on this eventually, but I wanted to share with you some basics. You want to pull in onto your ROI calculator, adjust the property, the type of property, loan number, the seller's value, and obviously you can see why it's important. I'll get into more specifics in a few minutes here. Monthly payment, interest rate, due date, and whatnot going down. These are extremely important because you need to be able to look back and see the details of the property and use some of these items to calculate some of the more important exit strategies. Legal balance, which is a big one, is it may not be all collectible, meaning what is the current legal balance is different from the collectible balance. We'll get into that in a minute as well. Unpaid balance, principal balance, is what the person owes outside of the extra fees and costs. Occupancy, pros and cons. Um, right here is stating the fact that someone that occupies could reinstate better, but also could drag out a foreclosure. Those who are vacant could have a higher chance of deed in lieu. However, the property may have problems when you do eventually get it. So I'm going to skip over this section just for a minute and go and dive into this part here. Items I get from the seller is servicing notes, property inspections, custodian exception report, reinstatement amount, the legal collectible amount, foreclosure docket number, bankruptcy, forced place insurance, what type of it is. And I'm going to go into over here, which explains a lot more why I asked for these items. The title policy, payment history, collateral file electronically, and BPL. So servicing notes is huge to get from the seller because it tells you what happened in the loan, what attempts have been made, what the borrower do, and what are the struggles the current seller has or successes. So the property inspection or property preservation or inspection reports, if they got inside the property to preserve it, you have inside pictures and conditions. Um, Other inspection reports may say the property is not occupied or it is occupied and here's what's going on. Custodian reports is just a history of the current seller's knowledge of the collateral file. Reinstatement amount. What I think people will miss on this is that the borrower reinstates by paying what's owed. The terms stay as is. You can't modify that loan. So if the borrower pays up to 4 or 5 grand and it's a 2% coupon, that 2% cannot change. So you can't modify it and make it your terms. You're now quote unquote stuck with what the original terms were. So you make sure you buy it with that in mind. So obviously bankruptcy files, fine docket numbers and whatnot. The insurance is a huge one as well. The claims made policy. Once a loan transfers, you can't file a claim if the incident happened while the previous seller owned it. Meaning that if you bought a property, 2 weeks later you found out the property had damage, You can't file an insurance claim if it's a claims made policy. So be sure you're being careful what the seller's forced place insurance is on the property. Next, expenses. These are the items that we include in our calculator to factor in what the expenses or expected expenses are when we're trying to put together what our return should or expected to be. So forced place insurance, you have to count that in. Most likely, if it's a non-performing loan, you are paying for insurance monthly. So you have to calculate what that expected is by month and times it out by the expected hold time, if it's foreclosure or whatnot. HOA, this is monthly HOA. If you're buying a loan in a state that there's a super lien duration, that monthly HOA can affect you because it can grow their legal balance on their side and foreclose from their position. It also comes to the fact that once you do buy the note and you do foreclose on it, you're now expected to pay that HOA bill from that point forward because you're not a legal owner of the property. Expected estimated rehab costs, simply what you think the rehab project would cost on that property to get to a sellable price. Obviously, sales commission, annual taxes, determining how much taxes will grow while you're foreclosing. So if it's a $500 property tax bill a year, you have to estimate the fact that if it takes you over a year and a half to foreclose, not only are you paying previous taxes, but also the ongoing taxes. Obviously, the back taxes. Other liens could be municipal liens, could be sewer liens, could be other liens that will reduce your profit. Bankruptcy relief costs. How much it costs if the borrower stops in bankruptcy to file a relief of stay if the trustee does not. Servicing costs. Obviously, if it's a non-performing loan, you're only paying a monthly fee for them to service your loan until you actually finish the foreclosure. The cost of the legal documents and the cost of sending letters and whatnot. You have to make sure you calculate that as well. Due diligence, BPO, O&E, collateral file. Foreclosure, you have to calculate the foreclosure cost plus the court costs plus publication and the auction costs. Sometimes the auctioneers take a percentage of the sales price. So you make sure you calculate for all that with the timeline involved. Okay, so if the property is going to foreclose with, in 5 months versus a year, that comes into play. That you make sure you're taking time in a factor of what the return is. So you can't price a property that is short month the same way you do a long month. However, you can bid a property that has a short foreclosure time frame. You can bid that up due to the fact that timeline is shorter. So some of the items that we include in our ROI calculator as well is not from the tape. It's either a factor we calculate or pulling from a chart that we have. So super lien states, right? So will the HOA supersede your property? Time to foreclosure. How long will it take from sending demand letters to actual auction? This is a huge one as well. Bidding by the return, not by a percent of BPO, BPO or UPB. You must bid with the mindset of this is the return I want. I put the formula we use so you know the fact that we're not bidding 55% or 50% or 65% of XYZ. What we factor in is that we want this return. What would our bid need to be to make that return happen? Based on all the expenses and all the expected income, this is the return I would like to have. Be it 2%, be it 200%. That's the formula we use to calculate that. Statute of limitations. This either cause a problem to foreclosure or just changing the due date, which reduces the legal collectible amount, because you're pushing it from 5 years to 4 years. Hardest hit states, we have a yes or no on that, so we know that if we get a property that is in a state like that, we can quickly determine that that's a possibility or an option for our exits. Redemption time. This is once a property foreclosed in certain states, there's a period of time where you can't sell it without a clean title. So you may have to wait a year for some states. In some states, it's 6 months. Some states, it's 30 days. So redemption is important because you need to know that in your calculations, you need to make sure you're holding it not only to the foreclosure point, but also including the redemption time. So your HOAs, your property taxes continue to add up. You can rent it, however, you can't sell it. So purchase price to seller's ratio, we have it that what is the ratio to seller's value? So just again, this is just an idea to look at. I still focus on bid by return, not on the percent. But this is kind of, hey, what am I bidding at percentage of? Say you're bidding at 2% of the seller's value. More than likely, the sellers will say no, but it's just kind of a guideline. Purchase to UPB on equity deals, right? So if you're bidding on a property that has equity, which we'll get into in a minute, you need to make sure that you're bidding at a decent amount of UPB so that you're bidding at 50, 60% of BPO. The seller most likely won't accept any bids below that, but kind of a guideline, right? Again, we're not focused on what the seller percentage of any other number but what our return is. But if you calculate a deal and your return is what you want to be, however, your percent of UPB and it's an equity deal is at 40%, more than likely the seller's gonna not agree. We put the cash and cash return on there. It's a very simple calculation. It's just purchase price times 12 divided by the payment times 12 divided by the purchase price. Of course, accounting. So some of the big factors we look out for is foreclosure, rehab, and sell. More than likely, it's expensive to foreclose, to rehab it, and sell it. So we factor that in to make sure that our bid, again, percentage on our return, takes in effect that if we have to foreclose, what's all the costs to do that? Rehab, what's our guess? And selling. So, what's commissions? What are closing costs? So we need to factor all that in to make sure that what our bid turns into is driven by our return, what goes in our pocket at the end of the day. Equity deals, of course, like I said before, is if the property sells third party at the auction, you're limited to collect. The only part you can collect is the amount that the legal collectible amount at the auction is. So if a property is worth $100,000, and your legal collectible amount is $50,000, you're not going to get the additional $50,000. You can only what they call credit bidding up to $50,000. That additional 50 grand is lost if it sells at auction third party. So a lot of people will say, well, you buy an equity deal and it's great. It is if the foreclosure takes place and it does not sell at auction. If it sells at auction, you lost out on all that equity. So be sure you're bidding at a decent percent of the actual UPB on equity deals. However, you're calculating what your return would be if it does sell third party and you lose out on all that equity. So next, another highlight, of course, borrow or reinstate without a modification. If you buy a property, and the borrower reinstates by paying what is currently owed, that loan cannot be modified, adjusted, or changed. So the terms of that loan stay in place. So if they pay 3, 4, 5, 10 grand, and you're not calculating what that yield would be if they reinstated, you could turn into a situation where that loan at 2% coupon and you bought it, they reinstate, which reduces your basis. However, their monthly payment turns into a very low yield, 8, 7, 6% annual return, because you are not able to modify that loan at all. So make sure you're calculating the reinstatement amount, lowering your basis. Will your payment per month yield enough money to make you comfortable? And then the true yield performing is what you actually are making on the deal, out excluding the principal return. So if you're paying 20 grand for a loan and the UPB is 40, in the life of the loan, the first $20,000 is not profit. It's actually just back to principal. So you want to find out, what am I truly getting as a return, as a investment? The principal return is not at all profit. So make sure you're looking at it with those eyes. We did do an equation that figures out that if the loan goes to maturity, what is my per year yield? Okay. So it's difficult to project when the seller may or may not sell the property or foreclose or whatnot. But if it's performing and continues to perform as is, what's my every year return, excluding your actual principal coming back to you? So I jumped through a lot of this. And again, some of these items we got here as well is from the tape, are amazingly helpful if you can figure it out. But maturity is huge for factoring in the actual return. Forbearance amount. Forbearance amount. Okay, so let's talk about a few of these real quick. Due date. Most people don't understand is what is the contractable currency of the borrower. When was the last? When are they up to? Where's their point where they're in their amortization schedule and they stopped? Even though they made payment last month, they're contractually current for 2015. That tells us how much term is left in the loan. So last paid is when the last time the borrower made a payment in general. Again, legal balance, all that stuff. Forbearance amount. Okay, so forbearance could be either interest or non-interest. It's just a payment to pay later. Could be a balloon, could be anything that a lender agreed that part of the UPB is pushed off to a later date, and it could have interest or could have zero interest. So make sure you're calculating that as a factor, because that will not gain interest in certain situations. So hopefully this kind of helped you understand some of the things that we go into, and what we offer some of our people that work closely with us. So hopefully we'll talk soon, and enjoy.